The static came first, a faint, dry hiss that bled from the old TV before any image appeared. I remember it because it sounded like rain behind a closed window. I'd been down there for an hour already, half buried in old cardboard boxes, chasing nostalgia like it could fix something. But when the tape slid into the VCR with that soft, mechanical click, everything about that basement changed. I didn't even know my mother was home until she said my name. Not yelled, said it. Quiet, level, almost too steady. Evan, please, not that one. That's when I knew it wasn't just another home movie. I hadn't planned on spending my Saturday knee-deep in dust and mildew. I'd come back to my mother's house in Columbus for the first time in months, half out of guilt, half because my work contract ended early. The place hadn't changed. Floral wallpaper from another decade, lemon-scented wood polish clinging to the air, and the faint hum of a fridge that always ran too loud. Mom had been upstairs when I came in, folding laundry or pretending to, like she always did when she didn't want to talk about something. I told her I'd clear out some space in the basement, maybe help her sort the boxes she always swore she'd get to. She smiled without meeting my eyes. "You don't have to do that, honey. It's fine down there." It wasn't fine. The basement smelled like damp concrete and old paint. Cobwebs hung off the ceiling like forgotten lace, and the single pull-string bulb flickered every few minutes. There were boxes stacked from when my dad was still alive, old Christmas decorations, a broken treadmill, and one metal shelf filled with VHS tapes, mostly labeled in his handwriting. 1994, Evan's 5th birthday. 1998, Christmas Eve. Mom's surprise party. The handwriting made something twist inside me. I hadn't seen it in years, but it still looked rushed, heavy-handed. My father died when I was 15. He'd been a quiet man with sudden tempers, and a silence afterward that lasted for hours. I don't talk about him much. Neither does Mom. So when I found that unlabeled black tape wedged behind an old toolbox, it felt out of place. No title, no date, just a strip of masking tape with one corner half peeled. I turned it over in my hands. It was heavier than the others. Something about it, it felt like a secret that had been waiting too long to breathe. I carried it upstairs, dust on my shirt, heart tapping faster than I'd admit. "Hey, Mom," I called out. "You got any idea what this one is?" She was at the kitchen table, sorting through mail. She didn't even look up right away. When she did, her face changed. It wasn't dramatic, just this small tightening around her mouth. "Where'd you find that?" she asked. "Down by the shelf. No label." I tried to joke. "Maybe my acting debut." She didn't smile. "Evan, put that back where you found it." That stopped. Me cold. Why? It's nothing important, just old junk. She pushed the envelopes aside like she needed her hands busy. "Please." I studied her for a moment. My mother's never been a good liar. She fiddles with her necklace when she's nervous. The little silver cross she's worn since before I was born. It was halfway to her throat already. "Is it about Dad?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up, sharp, then softened. "Just let it go." But I didn't. That night, after she went to bed, I found myself back downstairs. The bulb buzzed overhead like it was scolding me. I told myself I just wanted to make sure it wasn't moldy footage I could digitize, something harmless. But my gut said otherwise. I plugged in the old VCR I'd found in a box labeled Electronics Keep, and hooked it to the little TV on the workbench. The blue standby screen glowed weakly across the concrete walls. My hand hovered over the play button longer than I care to admit. When the picture flickered to life, the image was shaky, off-center. For a few seconds, it was just the inside of a living room, ours. The same furniture, same curtains, only newer. Someone was holding the camera at waist height, walking toward the couch. Then I heard it, my father's voice. "Okay, say hello." I froze. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly 15 years. Deep, rough-edged, that mix of control and command that made even simple words sound like rules. A woman's voice answered off screen. "Hi, Frank." Not my mother. The woman stepped into frame a moment later. She was young, late 20s maybe, wearing a pale yellow sundress. Her hair was long, dark. She smiled nervously into the lens like she wasn't sure what the video was for. "Say your name," my father said. "Claire." My skin went cold. He laughed, quiet, familiar. "Good girl." The camera shook slightly, like he was adjusting it. Then it tilted down, revealing a small boy on the carpet, me. 5 years old, playing with toy cars. The woman, Claire, leaned down and touched my shoulder. I looked up at her and said something, but the audio warbled. She smiled like she knew me. The tape cut there. Static. Then a different scene. This time it was darker. Maybe evening. The same living room, but I wasn't there. Just my father sitting in his armchair, a beer bottle next to him. The camera was on a tripod. He looked straight into it. "If anything happens to me," he said, "this stays in the house." He reached off camera, then leaned back, exhaling smoke. "They'll say it was an accident, but it wasn't. It never was." The screen jolted again, distorted lines crawling up the frame. Then silence. I stopped the tape. My hand was shaking. For a second, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator upstairs. What the hell was that? The floorboards creaked above me. "Evan?" Mom's voice, soft but strained. I scrambled to eject the tape. The plastic clicked, too loud in the quiet. She appeared at the top of the basement stairs, barefoot, wearing her old robe. The light behind her made her look smaller than I remembered. "I told you not to watch that," she said. Mom, what is this?" She hesitated halfway down the stairs. "Where did it stop?" "What do you mean, where did it stop?" Her face went pale. "Did he say anything else? About me?" I stared at her. "You knew about this?" "I wanted to throw it away," she whispered. "I thought I did." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard since I was a kid. Fear, not of me, but of something else entirely. She took the tape from my hands like it might bite her. "This shouldn't exist anymore," she said. "Mom, that woman, who is she?" Her grip tightened on the tape. "No one. She's no one. Dad said if something happens to him, Evan, please," her voice cracked, "let it go, for me." That should have been the end of it. A good son would have respected that. But something about her eyes when she said "for me" made it impossible to stop. Because if she was protecting me, why did she look like the one who needed protection? The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Pancakes, coffee, the news humming from the counter radio. She even asked if I wanted to visit my old elementary school for the craft fair that afternoon. But I couldn't shake the image of that woman, Claire, and the way she'd touched my shoulder like she knew me. When Mom went out to the grocery store, I went straight back downstairs. The tape was gone. I tore through every box, every drawer, nothing. But the VCR still smelled faintly of dust and ozone, that metallic tang that sticks to your fingers after handling old film. I knew she hadn't destroyed it yet. My mother isn't impulsive. She hides things, so I searched her room. Under the bed, behind the dresser, in the drawer where she kept old photo albums. Nothing. Then I noticed the closet shelf. A metal box, the kind people use for documents. It was half covered by a folded quilt. I pulled it down, heart racing. Inside were photos, letters, and another tape. This one had a label, written in her handwriting. Claire Ban, 1997. By the time she came home, I was sitting on her bed, the tape in my lap. She froze in the doorway, grocery bag handles biting into her wrist. "Evan?" I didn't move. "Tell me the truth. Who is she?" Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "You shouldn't have found that." "I'm not a kid anymore. Whatever this is, I deserve to know." She set the bags down slowly, then sat beside me. The bed creaked. For a long time she said nothing. The only sound was the fridge running downstairs. Finally she spoke. "Your father wasn't the man you remember." I swallowed. "You think I remember him fondly?" She shook her head. "Then you remember enough." "Was he cheating on you?" "Yes." The word came out so quiet it almost didn't register. "But it's worse than that." She reached for the tape. "You can't unsee what's on this." "I already saw part of the other one." Her hand stopped midair. "Then you know why I didn't want you to." "Not really." I met her eyes. "He said if something happens to him, it wasn't an accident." Her face seemed to age right in front of me. "He recorded that the night before he died." For the first time, she looked at me like she was measuring whether I could handle the rest. Then she stood, crossed to her dresser, and opened the top drawer. She took out an envelope, yellowed at the edges, and handed it to me. Inside was a police report. Accidental death. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Case closed. My father had been found in his car in the garage. They'd said he'd fallen asleep with the engine running. I was 15. Mom told me not to look at the photos. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because he wanted you to find that tape," she said quietly. "He left it down there for you." My throat tightened. "For me? I was a kid." "I know." She sank onto the bed again. "But you weren't supposed to see it until I was gone." That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about?" "I promised him I'd keep it hidden. That's what the note said when he—" She trailed off, eyes unfocused. "He said it would make sense one day." "Make sense how?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Please don't watch the other one. Not unless you want to hate both of us." That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt smaller than I remembered, like the walls were keeping secrets too. Around 2 in the morning, I got up, poured a glass of water, and stood by the kitchen window. The street outside was empty. Rain had started, soft against the glass. I thought about the word hate. My mother said it like it was inevitable, not hypothetical. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. If that tape held the truth about my father, I needed to see it. Not because I didn't trust her, because I couldn't live with not knowing. When she left for church the next morning, I followed her car halfway down the street to make sure she was gone. Then I went back to her room. The metal box was empty, but she'd forgotten something. The faint outline of dust where it had sat on the shelf. Beside it, a small keyhole in the back wall of the closet I'd never noticed. I pressed against it. It clicked open, just a simple push-lock panel. Behind it was a narrow space, maybe 8 inches deep. The tape was there, wrapped in a scarf. I unwrapped it slowly. The label looked older now. The ink faded. Claire, 1997. I brought it downstairs to the basement. The bulb buzzed again, steady this time, as if it knew what I was about to do. I slid the tape into the VCR and hit play. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, static. Then an image. The camera was in a hospital room. My mother was there. Younger, hair darker, eyes swollen. She was sitting in a chair, holding something. A baby. The camera zoomed in. She smiled weakly. Then I heard my father's voice. "Say it, Carol." She hesitated. "It's not—" "Say his name," he insisted. She looked at the baby, then back at him. "Evan." My stomach turned. My father's voice again. "Now tell me whose he is." The camera shook as she started crying. Frank, please, say it. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead. He's not yours. I hit pause. For a long time, I couldn't move. The screen froze on her face. My mother, younger, terrified, cradling me like something fragile she'd already broken. My breath came shallow. The air in the basement felt too thick, too close. I didn't hear the footsteps until she was right behind me. Evan! I turned. She was crying, one hand gripping the railing for balance. You weren't supposed to see that. I stared at her. Who is he? She didn't answer. Mom, who's my father? She looked at the floor. He's gone. Gone how? Her voice broke. Because of that tape. The next few seconds were a blur, her voice echoing through the basement, my own pulse drowning it out. Because of that tape. The words didn't fit together. They hung in the air like smoke, impossible to grab, but impossible to ignore. Mom, I said slowly. What do you mean because of it? She sat down on the bottom step. Her hands shook so much she had to press them between her knees. You need to turn it off, Evan. No, I said. My voice sounded rougher than I expected. Not until you tell me the truth. Her eyes flicked toward the TV. The paused frame still showed her younger face, haunted, exhausted, clutching a baby that didn't belong to the man behind the camera. To the man I thought was my father. She covered her mouth with one hand, and for a moment I thought she was going to faint. He wasn't supposed to record that, she said. He promised he wouldn't. I waited. When she finally looked at me, it was with something between guilt and pleading. Frank, your father. He found out about the affair a few months before that day. He told me he forgave me, but he didn't. He needed proof. That's why he set up the camera. Her voice was trembling now, but it was steady enough to slice through the air. He said he wanted it on record, so you'd know. So one day, you'd hate me the way he did. I tried to breathe, but it felt like all the air had been filtered through mud. So you just let him? I didn't know he was recording until it was too late, she whispered. I was tired, Evan, scared. He wasn't gentle. You were barely a few weeks old. I turned off the TV. The sudden quiet hit hard. Only the hum of the old VCR remained. Then, finally, I asked the question that had been pressing against my chest since that moment on screen. Who's my real father? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up and walked toward the workbench. She picked up the scarf the tape had been wrapped in, folding it like muscle memory. He was someone I knew before Frank, she said softly. Before I met your father, before all of this. His name was Alan. Alan who? Alan Weller. The name meant nothing to me. He worked at the TV station, she went on. He was kind, funny, the kind of man who listened. I didn't know I was pregnant until after he moved away. And Dad, Frank, did he know Alan? She nodded. They worked together for a while. That's how we met. My throat tightened. So he knew the man you cheated with? Yes. She looked down. He found out a year after we were married. And he kept raising me anyway? Her face twisted. He loved you, in his way, but he never forgave me. I sat back against the wall, the cold concrete grounding me in a way that felt almost merciful. Memories flickered, little things I'd ignored or explained away. The way Dad sometimes stared at me like he was trying to solve a problem. The sudden arguments between them that ended when I walked in. His silence on birthdays. The day he smashed the camcorder when I was 10, saying, "We don't need to remember everything." I thought it was just anger, but maybe it was disgust. The realization made my stomach twist. So he recorded you confessing, I said. Then what? Her voice went flat. Then he waited. Waited for what? For me to pay for it. she said quietly. He said he'd keep the tape safe, but if I ever left him, he'd show it to you. Make you hate me. He wanted that more than he wanted revenge. Then why did he die? She closed her eyes. Because one day, I said I was leaving anyway. I didn't move. She rubbed her temples, trying to hold herself together. He came home drunk that night, said if I walked out that door, he'd make sure neither of us could start over. Mom, I took you upstairs, she said, her voice distant. You were sleeping. I heard the garage door open, and I thought he was just cooling off. But when I went down later, she stopped, shaking her head. He'd already turned the car on. Her words fell apart after that, dissolving into the kind of sobs that don't sound like crying so much as survival. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then I asked quietly, "Why didn't you destroy the tape?" She looked at me, tears still streaking her cheeks. Because part of me thought you deserved to know the truth one day, just not like this. We didn't talk for the rest of the day. She stayed upstairs, pretending to read, by the window. I sat in the basement until the light changed color through the narrow window near the ceiling. At some point, I rewound the tape, my thumb hovering over the play button again and again, but I couldn't press it. I already knew enough to ruin every photo album upstairs. Still, one line from my father's first recording kept looping in my head. They'll say it was an accident, but it wasn't. He wasn't talking about the affair. He was talking about his death. And if that was true, then what my mother told me, what the police ruled, wasn't the whole story. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the date on the police report, March 17th, 2005. I was 15 then. I remember that morning, Mom waking me early, telling me Dad was gone. I remember the smell of gasoline when I walked through the hallway later, the faint residue of exhaust that never quite faded from the garage. But there was something else, something smaller. A cardboard box sitting by the workbench that day, marked Station Archives. Mom had thrown it out that week. I remember her saying, he doesn't need these old tapes anymore. I thought she was grieving. Now I wasn't so sure. By Sunday, the air in the house had shifted. Every word between us felt careful, like stepping across cracked ice. She made breakfast but didn't eat. I pretended to check emails I didn't have. At one point, she said, "You're angry, I understand." "I'm not," I lied. She looked up from her mug. "You have your father's eyes when you lie." That landed harder than she meant it to. I wanted to ask which father she meant, but the question died in my throat. Instead, I said, "I'm going to find out more about Alan." She froze. "Evan, don't. I need to know who he is." Her voice rose, sharper than I'd heard in years. "He doesn't want to be found." "How do you know?" "Because I made sure of it." That night, when she went to bed, I dug through the old boxes again. I found letters, bills, warranties, even Christmas cards, but no mention of anyone named Alan. Until I checked the bottom drawer of Dad's old desk, there was a single envelope, postmarked Cincinnati, 1997, addressed to Franklin Rhodes. The return address said Weller Broadcasting. Inside was a typed letter, unsigned. "Frank, you got what you wanted. I'm leaving town. She doesn't need to know where, neither do you. A." I turned the page over. In faint pen, a note in my father's handwriting, "He called the night before." That was all. But something about those 4 words crawled under my skin. Monday morning, I drove to the old Weller Broadcasting building. It was empty now, converted into a storage facility, but the name was still faintly visible on the brick wall. I spoke to the front office manager, an older man named Greg, who'd worked there since the early 2000s. When I mentioned Alan Weller, he frowned. "Yeah, I remember Alan," he said. "Quiet guy. Did editing for local news. Left suddenly. Some kind of family trouble, if I remember right." "Do you know where he went?" Greg thought for a moment. I think Kentucky. Maybe Louisville. Why? You family? I hesitated. Something like that. He shrugged. Good luck finding him. He'd be pushing 60 now. Back home, I didn't tell Mom about the visit. I needed time to think. But that night, she must have noticed I was gone because when I came downstairs to grab water, she was sitting at the table. You went looking, didn't you? She said. I didn't answer. She sighed. I should have told you more. But you need to understand, Alan wasn't who I thought he was either. What does that mean? He was married, she said. He told me he'd left his wife. He lied. When your father found out, he called him, said he'd tell her everything. Alan begged him not to. That's why he left town. I stared at her. So Dad blackmailed him? She flinched. He wanted control over both of us. And the night he died? Her silence stretched long enough to answer without words. Something didn't line up. If Dad had planned his own death to frame it as something else, why warn anyone? Why leave cryptic messages? Why say they'll call it an accident if he meant to kill himself? Unless he didn't. Over the next few days, I started piecing things together. The police report mentioned no signs of struggle, no forced entry, but there was a note in the evidence list. Video cassette recovered from vehicle, damaged. A tape. Not the ones in the basement, another one that never made it into our hands. I called the Columbus PD records office. They said old evidence from closed cases was archived at the county storage facility. I'd need next of kin permission to view it, which meant Mom. When I told her, she looked like I'd hit her. Why would you want to dig that up? Because he wanted someone to, I said. He literally said if something happens to him, this stays in the house. That means there's more. She set her jaw. Leave it buried, Evan. But I couldn't. The next morning, I called again, this time saying I was the son of the deceased and had permission. They told me the case number and that the tape was still in their possession, though degraded. I could request a copy for a small fee. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. That afternoon, while Mom napped, I checked the mailbox. The letter from the county office said the tape would be ready for pickup on Friday. 3 days. I tried to act normal, but my thoughts kept looping back to that basement, to the look on her face when she said, because of that tape. She wasn't afraid of what I'd see. She was afraid of what I'd prove. Thursday night, she came into my room holding a cup of tea. You're not sleeping, she said. I smiled weakly. Neither are you. She sat on the edge of the bed. I know you think there's something left to find, but some things don't heal when you uncover them. I just want to understand, I said. That's all. She nodded, eyes glistening. If you go through with this, don't do it alone. Friday came gray and wet. I drove to the county office, signed the release form, and waited while a clerk brought out a small case labeled Rhodes Franklin, March 2005. Inside, one VHS tape partially melted on one edge. Handle it carefully, the clerk warned. We can't guarantee playback quality. I drove home with it sitting in the passenger seat, wrapped in an old towel like it was alive. Mom was in the garden when I pulled up. She saw the case, and her face went white. Evan, what did you do? I didn't answer. I just walked past her into the house. Back in the basement, I set up the VCR again. My hands felt numb. Mom stood at the top of the stairs. Please, don't, she said softly. I looked up at her. If you want to tell me the truth first, I'll stop. She didn't move, so I pressed play. The screen filled with flickering static. Then, slowly, an image. It was the inside of a car. My father's car. The camera was mounted on the dash, angled toward the driver's seat. He looked straight into the lens. If anyone finds this, he said, voice low and strained, know that I didn't plan this alone. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper and set it on the seat beside him. "Carol," he whispered, "you always said secrets rot the soul. I hope you're right." Then the engine started. The camera shook. Smoke filled the frame. And just before the image cut out, before the static took over, I heard it, a second voice. A woman's, not my mother's. She said quietly, "I told you not to do this, Frank." The tape ended there. I sat frozen, heart pounding. Mom hadn't moved from the top of the stairs. Her hand was over her mouth. "Who was that?" I asked. She didn't answer. I rewound the last 10 seconds, turned up the volume, and played it again. The voice was faint, muffled, but I recognized the name. Claire, the woman from the first tape. I replayed that last frame until the TV began to hum with heat. The screen stuttered, and each time, that voice cut through the static, soft, pleading, too calm for what was happening. "I told you not to do this, Frank." Every time I heard it, my stomach pulled tighter. I knew that voice. Not from the tape, from somewhere else. But the harder I tried to place it, the more it slipped away. Mom stayed at the top of the stairs like she was rooted there. The light behind her threw her shadow down the steps, reaching toward me, but never touching. "Evan," she whispered, "turn it off." "It already is," I said, but I didn't look away from the frozen image on the screen. The blur of smoke, the outline of the steering wheel, and the faint glint of his wedding ring catching the light one last time. She came down the steps slowly, one hand gripping the rail. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "Who is she?" Mom's lips parted, but no sound came. "Who is Claire, Mom?" Her knees buckled slightly when I said the name. We sat on the floor. The smell of dust and old wood varnish filled the space between us. "I don't know what she told him," Mom said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "But she's the reason he called me that night." My throat felt raw. "The night he died?" She nodded. "He said he'd made a choice, that he was leaving me something I couldn't hide. I thought he meant the note he left in the kitchen, but there was more." "The tape." "Yes." She pressed her fingers to her temples, breathing hard. "She must have been with him that night." I frowned. "Why? How?" "She worked with him at the station after Alan left. I met her once, years ago, at a holiday party. She brought a pie. I didn't think much of it." "What did she look like?" Mom hesitated. "Tall, brown hair, a scar on her wrist. Why?" "Because I'd seen her before. Not on the tape. Before that." 2 years ago, after Dad's death anniversary, I got a letter addressed to me at my apartment in Atlanta. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white, of a man standing beside a gas station payphone. The handwriting on the back said, "He didn't mean to leave you." At the time, I thought it was a prank. I threw it out. But now, the woman's voice from the tape, that faint inflection when she said Frank, it matched the one I heard when I called the number printed at the bottom of that photo, back before I tossed it. A woman had answered. She said, "You shouldn't have found this." Then she hung up. I told Mom about the photo. Her face went still. "Do you still have it?" "No, I threw it away." She exhaled shakily. "Then she's still alive." "You think she sent it?" "She's the only one who could have known that handwriting. It was his." I leaned back against the wall, the concrete biting into my shoulder blades. So she was there when he died. She's still out there, and she's watching us. Mom looked at me, eyes wide with a kind of old, dormant fear. "Evan, you need to stop. Whoever she is, she's dangerous." "Mom, she's the only one who knows what really happened." "Exactly," she said. "That's why she's dangerous." That night, I couldn't stop hearing the tape in my head. Not just her voice. The way Dad said, "Know that I didn't plan this alone." He didn't say, "I didn't do this." He said, I didn't plan it alone. That meant cooperation, not innocence. And if he didn't plan it alone, someone else did. Someone in that car. By morning, Mom was already packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Going to stay with Aunt Marlene for a while." "Marlene lives in Arizona." "I know. You can't just leave." She zipped the suitcase shut. "I need space, Evan. You're chasing ghosts. I can't stop you, but I won't stay and watch you destroy yourself over them." Her tone was steady, almost rehearsed. I didn't try to stop her. I just said, "If you leave, I'm going to find her." That made her pause. "You don't even know where to start." "Maybe not," I said, "but she knows me." Mom hesitated at the door. "If she reaches out again, don't go alone." Then she was gone. The house felt emptier than I remembered. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock, everything echoed louder. I spent that day calling old TV station numbers, trying to find records of anyone named Claire who worked there in the late 90s or early 2000s. Most of the numbers were disconnected, but one receptionist said, "We used to have a Claire Benson here, left after some trouble around 2005. Why do you ask?" My pulse jumped. "Do you know where she went?" "Not really. HR might have archived her file, but that's off-site." "Can you tell me where off-site?" She hesitated, then sighed. "There's a storage unit north of town. Building C, Locker 14. Don't tell anyone I told you that." It was already dusk by the time I got there. The storage facility sat off an old service road, half the lights flickering. The air smelled like wet asphalt. I walked down the narrow aisles until I found Locker 14. The padlock was rusted, but the latch was loose. Someone had already been here. Inside, the space was nearly empty. Just a folding chair, a few stacks of film reels, and a small cardboard box labeled Weller Edits. When I opened it, I found several VHS tapes, some labeled with station dates, others blank. On top of them was a single envelope with my name written in blue ink. Evan. My hands went cold. Inside the envelope was a short note. "You looked just like him when you came to the station. He wanted you to know the truth, but your mother isn't ready to let it out. Don't trust the last tape." No signature, just an address scribbled underneath. Edgewater Motel, room 12. I stood there, trying to slow my breathing. The handwriting wasn't my father's, but it wasn't a stranger's either. It was the same writing from the photograph I'd thrown away. When I got back to the car, I sat there for a long time, holding the note. Don't trust the last tape. The last tape? There was another one? Or did she mean the one I just watched? The one from the car? I looked at the box again. One of the blank tapes had a faint mark on its edge, like someone had tried to peel off a label. I lifted it into the light. There, barely visible under the residue, were 2 letters scratched into the plastic. C.R. Carol Rhodes, my mother. I drove back home with that tape sitting on the passenger seat, the rain beating against the windshield. The whole way, I kept thinking about the note. He wanted you to know the truth. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for a faint glow in the living room window. I got out slowly, heart pounding. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the TV was on, the screen flickering blue. The tape was already playing. My mother was sitting on the couch, eyes red, hands clasped tight in her lap. "I thought you left," I said quietly. "I did," she said. "Then I realized you'd go anyway." On the screen, an image came into focus. Our living room again, years earlier. My father stood behind the camera, but the voice narrating wasn't his. It was hers, Mom's. "I don't know why I'm recording this," her younger voice said. "Maybe to remember what it feels like before it happens." She set the camera down on a counter and moved out of frame. "You said you'd tell him everything, Frank. You said you'd ruin me. A pause, the sound of a car starting in the distance. I'm not letting you. Then she stepped back into view, holding a small bottle, antifreeze. She poured it into a thermos, mixed it with coffee, and whispered, I hope you forgive me before he does. The screen flickered. The audio warped. Then nothing. I stared at the TV, my mouth dry. Mom, I said, what is this? She didn't look at me. He wasn't supposed to find it. You recorded yourself poisoning him? Her voice cracked. It wasn't like that. He was going to kill us both. He said it every day that week. He had the car ready. I just got there first. My chest felt hollow. You killed him. Tears filled her eyes. I saved you. I turned off the TV. For a moment, the silence in the room was so deep it felt alive. She whispered, I was going to destroy it, but then she came by. Claire. She nodded. She said she'd keep it safe, that she'd make sure you never saw it. But she lied. She was there that night. She wanted him to leave me. When he died, she tried to blackmail me, said she'd take you unless I gave her everything. Money? No, she said quietly. You. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. She couldn't have children, Mom said. She thought you were hers, that because of Alan she had a claim. Frank told her before he... She trailed off. He used you as leverage. The room started spinning. So all of this, all of it, was about who I belonged to? She reached for me, but I stepped back. Evan, please. No, don't touch me. Her hand trembled in the air before falling to her side. I never meant for you to find any of this. You mean you never meant to get caught? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I walked out into the rain without a coat. The streetlights glowed orange against the puddles. I must have walked half a mile before I realized I was holding the tape in my hand, the one labeled CR. The note from the storage locker burned in my pocket. Don't trust the last tape. My mind spun. If Mom's confession was the last tape, who made sure I'd find it? And why now? I checked into a motel off the interstate, a place that smelled like bleach and damp carpet. The room number hit me as soon as I slid the key card in. 12. Edgewater Motel. The same address written on the note. The front desk clerk didn't even look up when I asked if anyone else had checked in tonight. Yeah, he said. Lady came through about an hour ago. Said she was waiting for someone. Room next to yours. I froze. What's her name? Didn't say. Brown hair, scar on her wrist. I stood outside her door for a long time before I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Louder. Then the door opened an inch. Chain still latched. Evan, she said softly, you came. It was her. Claire. Older now, maybe late 50s, but still with that calm voice, that look of someone who's already seen every version of the truth. Why? I asked. Why now? She smiled sadly. Because he finally told me to. Who? Your father, she said. The one who's still alive. For a few seconds, I thought she was joking. The rain outside thudded against the metal awning, steady, like a clock counting down. I stared through the half-open door, trying to read her face. My father's dead, I said finally. Claire shook her head slowly. That's what your mother needed you to believe. The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces, like ice cracking under my feet. I pushed the door wider, and she stepped back, letting me in. The room smelled of cigarettes and old air freshener. The curtains were drawn tight. A single lamp on the dresser threw a weak yellow cone across the carpet. On the table sat a portable VHS player, humming faintly. Claire motioned for me to sit. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like someone afraid of waking something invisible. I've been waiting for this, she said. For what? For you to find me. I stayed standing. You're saying my father's alive? After all this time? She met my eyes. He was. Was? He died 3 years ago. My voice caught. You said he is alive. I said the one you think is dead is not the man in that car. She opened a small metal case on the table and slid out another tape. Frank Rhodes didn't die in that garage. Someone else did. I couldn't breathe for a second. You expect me to believe my mother staged his death? Claire's eyes softened. No, she was told to believe it. She handed me the tape. The label was written in the same blue ink as the letter. March 2005, truth copy. I stared at it. What's on this? Everything she didn't want you to see? I ran a hand through my hair. Why should I trust you? You were there. You lied. You blackmailed her. I tried to protect you, she said quietly. From both of them. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I saw the woman from that first tape. The nervous smile, the way she'd touched my shoulder when I was a child. What do you mean, both of them? She sighed. Your mother and Frank weren't victims, Evan. They were partners. For a while. The lamp buzzed, a faint electric hum filling the silence. I sat down, more because my knees gave up than because I wanted to. Claire reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. He sent this to me before it all went wrong. Inside was a single photograph. A man in a hospital bed, his face half covered in bandages. Only his eyes were visible. I knew those eyes. Who is that? I whispered. Frank, she said. After the fire. I looked up sharply. There wasn't a fire. There was, she said, in the garage, after they switched bodies. She must have seen the disbelief in my face because she pressed on. He planned it for months. He was drowning in debt, Evan. Gambling, failed investments, you name it. The insurance payout was his only way out. Your mother agreed to help him stage the death. They used a drifter, someone he'd hired for work around the house, paid him cash. The man's name never made it into the report. I felt my stomach turn. You're saying my mother and father faked his death? She thought it was temporary, Claire said. A few days until the paperwork cleared. But when the body was found, she realized he'd gone too far. He called me that night, panicked, said he couldn't go through with it. I went to the garage to stop him, but when I got there, the fire had already started. I leaned forward. Then how did he survive? He crawled out the back, she said. Burned, half blind but alive. I took him to a safe house. We thought your mother would leave town, but she stayed, collected the money, and rebuilt her life. The air in the room thickened. I could hear my pulse in my ears. She told me he was dead, I said. She believed it for a while, Claire said, until he sent her a message 2 years later, a recording. She gestured to the tape. That's what this is. I swallowed. Why are you showing me? Because he wanted you to know what kind of people raised you. Her eyes glistened, the kind of sadness that comes from being right too late. He spent years trying to come back, Evan, but by the time he did, he wasn't the same. The guilt, it rotted him. He started sending me tapes, rambling about how you needed to know the truth. Then he disappeared for good. Disappeared where? She looked away. Somewhere quiet. I buried him myself. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping the window like static. I stared at the tape. If I watch this, what happens? Claire's voice went faint. Then you'll know who you are. I slid the cassette into the player. The machine clicked, whirred, and the screen filled with gray noise before resolving into an image. A dimly lit room. A man sitting at a table, his face half in shadow. The left side scarred, raw, shiny under the light. He looked straight into the camera. "Evan," he said. I stopped breathing. It was him. Even through the burns, the voice was unmistakable. "I don't know how much of me she told you about," he said, "but if you're watching this, it means she didn't keep her promise." He coughed, leaned forward. "The man in the garage wasn't me. I didn't kill myself. I let her think I did. Because if I stayed, one of us was going to die anyway." He paused, wiped his mouth with a trembling hand. "She didn't just have an affair, Evan. She made a deal. The man she slept with, Alan Weller, wasn't just some coworker. He was my partner in the insurance scheme. And when it all started falling apart, she turned us against each other." The camera shook slightly. "She killed him," he said, "and blamed me." I sat frozen, watching his mouth form each word like a confession carved from rot. She poisoned him at a bar in Cincinnati, put antifreeze in his drink, the same way she tried to do to me. But I learned. I switched the cups. He gave a bitter smile. "That's what your mother does, son. She hides her guilt inside someone else's story." He leaned closer. "If she tells you I hurt her, if she shows you that tape, don't believe it. She recorded it after the fact, staged it. That's what she does best." The image flickered again. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, just to see her for what she is." The tape ended there. Claire turned off the player. The hum of the machine died, leaving only the sound of the rain. I sat there, numb, words piling up behind my teeth, with nowhere to go. "He sent me that 5 years ago," Claire said quietly. "I didn't know what to do with it. I thought maybe it was just guilt. But when I saw you come back to town, I knew it was time." I rubbed my temples. "None of this makes sense." "It's not supposed to," she said. "They built their lives on lies, and you were the martyr." I stood up. I need to talk to her." Claire nodded. "You won't find her at the house." "How do you know that?" "She's been watching me. Every time I move, she finds me. You coming here, it won't stay secret long." "She's my mother." "She's a survivor," Claire said, "and survivors don't leave witnesses." I opened the door. "Then I guess we'll find out which one of you's telling the truth." I drove through the rain until my wipers started to fail. By the time I reached home, Dawn was bleeding through the clouds. Her car was back in the driveway. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and something chemical underneath it. "Mom?" No answer. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a stack of letters spread out like cards. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I told you not to go to her," she said. "And I told you I'd find her," I shot back. Her eyes flicked toward the tape in my hand. "So you watched it?" "Yes." "Then you know she's lying. She said the same about you." Her mouth tightened. "Of course she did." I set the tape on the table between us. "He said you killed Alan." Her breath hitched. "He told you that?" "He said you poisoned him, that the tape you showed me was fake." She laughed. Short, sharp, humorless. "He would say that. Is it true?" She looked up, tears brimming. "I didn't kill Alan. Frank did. But he needed someone to blame when it went wrong. I made the mistake of believing I could outsmart him. I thought if I gave him the insurance money, he'd disappear for good." "And did he?" "He did, for a while. Then he sent letters, threats, said he'd take you next." The air between us thickened again. She looked at me the way people look at a photograph of someone they've already lost. "Evan, whatever she told you, whatever he said, it doesn't matter anymore. The truth won't fix anything." I shook my head. "You don't get to decide that." She reached out, her fingers trembling. "You're my son." I pulled my hand back. "Am I?" Her face crumpled. "Yes. No matter what he said, no matter who he was." I stood there, looking at her. The woman who'd raised me, lied to me, maybe saved me, maybe ruined me. And for the first time, I didn't know if I wanted to forgive her or run. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the garage, staring at the spot where the car used to be, where my childhood ended. The air smelled faintly of oil and rust, and beneath it, something else, something acrid and old. On the workbench, a small red light blinked from my phone. A new voicemail. I pressed play. A woman's voice. "Evan, it's me. She's on her way." Claire. The message timestamp read 10:12 p.m., 5 minutes ago. I looked toward the house. Through the narrow garage window, I saw the flicker of a light turning on upstairs. Then another. Footsteps. The sound of footsteps above me wasn't loud. It was deliberate, slow, measured. I stayed in the dark, phone still in my hand, Claire's voice replaying in my head. She's on her way. For the first time in my life, I didn't know which she I should be afraid of. The garage light switch was a few feet away. I didn't move toward it. Instead, I listened. The steps shifted from the hallway to the top of the stairs leading down to the basement door. Then, creak. It opened. I slipped behind the shelving unit, heart pounding. "Evan?" My mother's voice. Calm, too calm. "I know you're down here." Her shadow stretched across the concrete floor as she descended the steps. "Why are you hiding?" she asked softly. "You think I'm going to hurt you?" I stayed silent. She exhaled, a sound that trembled just slightly. "She called you, didn't she?" Still nothing. "She's not who you think she is," Mom said. "She's been lying since before you were born." I could see the glint of something in her hand, a small object catching the basement bulb. For a second, I thought it was a knife. Then I saw the edge of the tape. The one labeled March 2005, truth copy. "I know you watched this," she said, "but you didn't finish it, did you?" The words pulled me out of hiding. "What are you talking about?" She looked up sharply, her face pale but steady. "That recording, it isn't complete. The last minute was cut off. He wanted you to see the part that made him the victim. That's what he always wanted." She held the tape out. "Let me show you the rest." I hesitated, eyes flicking between her and the stairs. "Where did you get that?" "I took it from her car." "She's here?" Her expression didn't change. "Not anymore." A chill ran through me. "What did you do?" "She followed you here," Mom said. "She was waiting outside. I told her to leave. She wouldn't." Her voice faltered. "So I made her." I pushed past her, up the stairs 2 at a time. The front door was cracked open. Rain blew in through the gap, pooling on the hardwood. The night outside was pitch black, the storm heavier now. "Claire!" I called out. No answer. The driveway was empty, except for a set of tire tracks veering off into the ditch. I ran to the edge of the property. Headlights still glowed faintly from a car resting nose down against a tree at the bottom of the embankment. I scrambled down the slope, mud soaking my shoes. The driver's door was open. No one inside. Just the faint smell of gasoline and the tape player sitting on the passenger seat. The player was still running. The tape inside had stopped at the end of its reel. I ejected it carefully. The label was smeared, but I could still make it out. Rhodes, 2005 uncut. Behind me, thunder rolled. I looked back toward the house. The upstairs light flicked on again. She was watching me. By the time I came back inside, Mom was standing in the living room holding a towel. She looked smaller somehow, drenched from the rain she hadn't even walked through. "Where is she?" I demanded. "She left," Mom said. "She wanted you to find that tape. That's all she ever wanted." I held it up. "Then let's see what she wanted me to see." Her jaw clenched. "Evan," numbskull, I said, "we're watching it together." The TV glowed pale blue. The VCR whirred. The footage was familiar, the same as before. My father at the table, scarred, eyes hollow, telling me she'd killed Alan. that she'd faked everything. Then, right where the other version ended, the image stuttered. He leaned back in his chair. His voice dropped. "Maybe you think I'm lying, son," he said. "But the truth is, we all are." He coughed, wincing. "Your mother, Claire, me. There's no clean story, just choices. And every one of us made the wrong one." He looked down, fingers trembling. "She wanted to leave, but I couldn't let her. So I set the car. I meant to die. I didn't think she'd come back." He swallowed hard. "But she did. And she pulled me out. You wouldn't be alive if she hadn't." He stared into the lens. "Whatever you do, don't let her carry this alone." Then the tape went black. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything he'd said. Mom stood frozen, her face unreadable. Finally she whispered, "He always knew how to twist the truth." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but so do you." Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. "He's gone now. Claire's gone. You and we're all that's left." I shook my head. "No. What's left is a mess neither of you had the courage to clean up." She stepped forward, tears streaking her cheeks. "Evan, please, don't leave me." "I'm not leaving us," I said, "but I can't stay here either." I spent the night at a motel just outside town, the same one Claire had used. Room 14 this time, 2 doors down from where we'd talked. I didn't sleep. I just sat with the tapes laid out in front of me. Unlabeled. Claire, 1997. CR, March 2005. Truth copy. Rhodes, 2005. Uncut. Each one a version of my family that couldn't coexist with the others. When the sun came up, I loaded them into a box, drove to the river bridge outside Columbus, and tossed them in one by one. They sank fast, swallowed without a trace. A month later, I sold the house. Mom moved into a small apartment near my aunt's place. We speak sometimes, holidays, birthdays, but neither of us mentions the tapes. Every now and then, though, when the TV buzzes to static, I feel it again. That faint, dry hiss, like rain behind glass. Sometimes I dream about that night. The basement, the hum of the VCR, her voice on the stairs, and in the dream, I don't stop her. I let her finish what she was going to say, but she never does. The tape always runs out first. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.